Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Allie Payne. Welcome to Exponentially You, Living Passionately on Purpose. I am a certified life coach. I've been working in this industry for approximately 20 years now, and I have had the opportunity to work with a number of amazing, ambitious, incredible individuals, many of them highly successful entrepreneurs, as well as CEOs to small to medium-sized companies and a few on the larger side. I'm also a public speaker, so I share this information from stage with larger groups, whether it's a professional group or it's more of a corporate association where they're an AGM. And this is what I absolutely love to do. This is me living passionately on purpose. Today, I want to talk about values. Actually, sorry, just before I step into that, I want to thank everybody for the overwhelming, amazing response that I've had to the previous blab that I did about life purpose. Of course, I recorded that blab and the link is permanent. So if you haven't got it or you're not sure where to find it, please just send me a quick message through Twitter there, or you can send me via email, Allie, A-L-Y, at AlliePayne, AlliePain.com. And I'm happy to send you the recording for my last blab about life purpose. It was really fun, and I've gotten a really great response from it. So I hope that in some way it helps you, helps just one more person to be clear about why they're here and how to do even more of that on purpose, to live consciously on purpose. I am recording this blab as well, and so if you've missed it, thank you for joining me at whatever time you're watching this or listening to this. And I would love to hear from you, love to hear what your experience about values are. Do you know your values? Do you understand why it's important to know your values and what the benefit of that is? Perhaps more importantly, do you understand what the consequence of not knowing your values are and what happens when we aren't aware of those values, the kinds of things that we tend to happen in our lives and that can attract? It's not always awesome. So I'm going to just start in and be talking about values. So I've done a number of blogs on this, and this is some of the really foundational work that I do with clients, which I mentioned in my last blog I do with life purpose as well. I think values is ultimately fundamental, right next to life purpose. So whether I'm working with an individual or I'm working with a corporation, values is right up there at the first things that I address with my clients. So most people believe that their core values are a wish list of the person that they would like to be at their most enlightened state. Actually, I disagree. Values are not us at our most enlightened state. Values are something I believe that we were born with. I believe that our core values are sewn into us just like our DNA. It's just a part of who our DNA, we were born that way. And I'll explain a little bit more why on that later on, as far as, nature versus nurture and all that stuff. So we were born with values. They are who we are. And our values are, again, they're not a wish list. So this is really important to do this exercise if this is something that you choose to find out about you, with some context so that you don't end up with a wish list, and a few other myths about values. So it's important to really understand this. I hope that this helps you to do this, and then that you go off and do this exercise. You need to have a list of values. So if you're looking for a list of values, again, just send me a quick message here via Twitter or on my Facebook page, AlliePain.com. You can find me, and I will be happy to provide a list of values to help you to start to hone in on what are values words. So that's the starter. Values are singular words. Values are not statements. They are not sentences. They are not adjectives, verbs, and descriptors. They are beliefs. Sometimes they are behaviors, although our values are a distinct reflection of our beliefs, and they dictate our behaviors. So I will behave based on what I believe. Now, that's first why I believe it's really, really important to understand my values. Well, yes, beliefs can change over time. Beliefs, nature versus nurture, right? So what if I believed one thing and I was raised in a household who believes another thing? Then don't I adapt to the nurture versus what I was born with? Well, possibly yes. But what I have seen more than not is that values, or a alignment of values, or a lack of alignment in values, are the number one reason that relationships don't work. Now, that might be a little simplistic. You might be looking at me, well, you have not met them. Well, yes, I understand that people have some not so charming behaviors that also make relationships not work. But a lot of those behaviors and things that go on in a relationship are purely because there's a values mismatch. And that happens in business as well, at a corporate level. So values can be enormously aligned, and not only do I feel like, wow, I just can talk to this person forever and we can go do stuff and things are just always fun. It feels easy. Doesn't mean we never argue or don't disagree. That's absolutely not true. It just seems easier. The relationship just has a sense of ease about it. Whereas when my values are misaligned with someone or a business I work in or an organization I'm trying to do business with, pretty much every single thing that happens is going to feel like this, because we're just not coming from the same fundamental, foundational sense of beliefs about life, about the world, about myself, about you. So this is another reason why values are absolutely crucial to understand. And you need to work off a list of values. I really don't encourage you to set on out to find your values and sort of make them up yourself. I'm not saying that you don't know you. Absolutely. You are the expert on you. And if I give you a list of values to work from, you're more likely to come up with the best words, even if they're not on the list, but something that's, say, a mix between one or two or the other, so that you come up with the right words and stay away from the phrases and the sentences. It gets messy. And also it's helpful to have someone to continue to remind you as you're doing this exercise, this is not a wish list. This is not the who you are, you think you are your most enlightened self. This just is. And, people will say to me, well, I'm in a really bad spot right now. How, my values can't possibly be showing. Oh, yes, they are. Oh, yes, they are. This is a really key point that I need you to understand about core values. Values are not inherently positive or negative. They are neutral. A value just is. Now, if you're in a really bad spot in your life and you're certainly not experiencing the levels of joy and love and relationship and a number of other things that you wish that you had, you likely are expressing your values in their negative or destructive form. How can that be? Well, let me give you an example. This is a very popular example I use in a lot of my keynotes. Domestic violence, unfortunately, is research based that it comes from one particular value in its destructive form. Now, I don't mean the domestic violence itself, okay? Let me be clear. What I mean is why domestic violence that occurs in relationships feels perpetual, and the person the abusee, the person experiencing the abuse, very often does not leave, at risk sometimes of their own life. Why don't they leave? And this has actually even been studied in some kidnapping cases of horrific abuse, and why the person that was kidnapped, even if allowed to, or seemingly from an outside perspective, could leave, why they don't. It's a value of loyalty. Loyalty. How is it that loyalty could possibly create, such havoc? Well, you see, again, loyalty is a value. The destructive part of loyalty might be I stay in situations that are destructive to me, that are dangerous for me, that are toxic for me, and I stay in them longer than even I intellectually understand is beneficial or is necessary, as possible. And yet I stay because I'm loyal. So that might seem like a bit of an extreme example, but that is an example of what I mean by loyalty not meaning it. Values are not all flowery unicorns, rainbows. That's not it. Values have an equally destructive side that they do a constructive side. So when we can accept and we can understand that, it's easier to see that I was born with a set of values. I have a set of values. They're always with me, and I'm always expressing them. I just might not be expressing them at their most positive or constructive state, which creates some really messy, icky places in my life and generally in my relationships with those people around me. It doesn't mean my values aren't present then. No, actually, they're enormously present, but not likely in their constructive form. So learning my values is one thing, actually understanding what my core values are. The second part is understanding, what does it even mean to me when I constructively express that value? What does it look like for me to do that on a regular basis? And that's why we call it a values compass. Because when you understand your values, not just the words, but the actual resonant, definition for you, okay, what they mean to you, then you can wake up every day and say, okay, how am I going to express my values constructively today? And it's amazing what happens when we actually hold that frame of reference. How am I going to constructively express my values today? It's unbelievable. I do this work when I'm in retreats and workshops that I offer. I do the values work with the participants, and then I'll give them a simple exercise. It might be go for a walk. We might go for a group walk. We might put on a piece of music and do a little dance. We might do some drawing. Oh my goodness. I'll be right back. You just never know when someone's going to come to your door while you're trying to do a blab. I love how no matter what we are doing, no matter how put together we think we are, no matter how spit, spot, and polished we got stuff, you know what? Life still happens. And it does. And that courier just wanted to darn make sure that I got that package. So thank you, Mr. Courier. I am back now from the blab. If you don't, life makes me laugh, I tell you. Okay, so the values compass and how we do this constructively. When I give exercises to participants, once we've done the exercise and they are understanding what the constructive side of their values are, they're very clear. It is unbelievable how the behavior, what they display, how they show up in these very simple exercises is enormously different. And their experience of that very simple exercise, whatever it was, is also very different because they are conscious about expressing their values in that moment. Simple, simple thing. And yet out of that exercise comes such awareness and insight about the impact of knowing values and actually inherently within my body what it feels like to really live them constructively. So here's another example of values and how they can go off track. So let's say someone has a value for freedom, very strong value for them, just really need freedom. At its destructive perspective, okay, this person might, stay out too late, eat crappy food, just doesn't want to conform to any particular norms. Let's say that, freedom, my value is freedom. Perhaps even they have a difficult time being faithful in relationships because I need freedom. And sometimes it comes with enormous guilt, huge guilt in when I'm living a value that I now think is have deemed as terrible, horrible, negative because of the consequences that came with it, when actually there's nothing inherently wrong with the value because values are not negative or positive. It's how I choose to live them out. And when that awareness comes, the constructive behavior that comes from freedom, when I understand what it can mean to me, I'm actually quite willing to live and conform to particular laws and norms or health or, relationship commitments or work. Instead of showing up late, leaving early, taking long lunches, not showing up one day and just not letting you know because I want freedom. Generally, that person's an entrepreneur, by the way. Once that person understands that freedom is a value and how to live that constructively, they can now go and negotiate that. I'm not saying they might negotiate, polygamy in a relationship. It's not what I'm saying. There are ways for them to have the rich experience of freedom at a really constructive level without completely destroying relationships or their life, their health in the meantime. Values are a set of beliefs that dictate our behavior. Generally, not generally. When I do this work, I say to people, you can have 4 or 5 core values. That is all. It's like the life purpose stuff I was talking about in my last blab. No, you don't get to have a paragraph. Toss that out. No, you can have 4 or 5 because when we get to the core values list of 9 and 10 and 12, and yes, I have worked in massive billion-dollar organizations who actually have attempted that, not one person can remember past number 3 or 4. They can't. So how is that actually benefiting the corporation to help guide people's daily behavior when they can't even remember what they are? So I would ask the same thing when we were talking about purpose, to keep asking, okay, is that a fundamental or is that a byproduct of when I do something else? So is freedom actually a fundamental value for me, or do I experience freedom when I'm doing one of my core values? So constantly need to ask ourselves, am I at the bottom yet? Am I at the lowest level yet with this? And this is one exercise that I love, my dictionary app. I pull up my thesaurus. I don't think there is perhaps a more important exercise where wordsmithing, so really finding out the actual definition of the words, becomes more valuable. It's important in purpose, it's important in a vision statement, but when we're talking about values, a core list of 4 to 5 words that you are going to use that dictates your behavior. It's something you were born with, so we're trying to articulate this and find this out based on, again, similar to purpose, based on past successes, and more importantly about values, actually, the things that piss us off, the things that super annoy us and get us riled up, boy, I guarantee you that you're up against a value that's not feeling like it's really respected, or it's not playing out the right way. That's how we understand where values are. So I say 4 or 5 because the other thing is, from a visual perspective, it's easy to imagine a fence, right? Like I've got my little 4-sided corral of my fence, and this is my values fence. So I have my 4 sides. When I determine my 4 core values, and yes, if you want 5, okay, we'll cut the fence and we'll put in a little gate. There has to be a metaphor and some kind of visual drawing for everything, or I can't work with it. Then the metaphor does literally become, when I have my values corral, if people aren't aligned with me on at least half of my values, they're just not going to get in the corral. They're not going to come past the gate. And this is, please understand that this does not make that other person bad, does not make them wrong. And I'm sorry, but you are not perfect. And no, you are not right. Values just are. It just is. There is no, it's really irrelevant to attempt to judge values. You might not love how someone is expressing a particular value, but their values are neutral. So when someone doesn't align with your values, they're not wrong, they're not bad. You don't need to go and start trashing them, on Facebook, or in your community, because they just aren't aligned with you. I just don't recommend having, certainly don't go into business with them. You might not want to sit on a few councils with them, or, some kind of really intimate relationship. It's probably not going to work. It doesn't matter what kind of eye candy they are. It's probably not going to work. So when you get your core values down to the 4 or 5, and you have gone through the thesaurus, and I really mean this, it is so powerful when I start looking up meanings for words, because under a thesaurus, I actually generally don't use a dictionary. I don't find the dictionary definitions as helpful as finding the thesaurus, because again, you are the expert on you. And just like in purpose, when I find someone's purpose or an organizational purpose, it's like somebody just strummed the spiritual string of that entity, that person, that organization. We know it. The room goes clunk. It's just silent, and we know. Values are the same. And so finding the definition of the word is not as powerful as looking up a thesaurus and seeing, it's like it makes the word 3-dimensional. A definition still feels kind of 2-dimensional. When I'm using a thesaurus to look up values, it feels far more 3-dimensional, really brings the word to life. And it also helps me to understand is that the actual word, or as I'm reading off all of the other synonyms similar to the word, no, it's actually that. And then if I go look up that, and this is another synonym, it helps me, say synonym fast 10 times, that'll help you. It helps my clients to determine which one is an outcome of expressing that value constructively, and which one is the fundamental have experience that you're willing to fight for. And this is, again, I don't like using the negative connotation of a word. I believe that life purpose needs to be stated in an affirmative form. Values, although they are inherently neutral, we are talking about the constructive form of that, because that's what I want you to focus on. It's really, really, really important when we round out the word. Sometimes we also realize it's actually not that word. It helps us to say, well, maybe it's this word. So use a thesaurus, number one tool. And I mean, it doesn't matter what smartphone you have or computer you have, or go online and use a dictionary. And when the cool part about when you're using an app or using technology to do this is that when you type in a word to the thesaurus, and it tells you all the other synonyms for the word, each of those are links. So if you see one and you say, wow, it feels like that one maybe a little more, you can just click on that one and it'll bring up a whole other list. So it's like this endless unwinding the ball of yarn kind of yummy exercise that gets really interesting to dig down for people to come up with those values. Now, again, 4 or 5, that's all. You can have a fence. If you need 5, fine, put a gate in your fence. Okay. When I do this exercise with clients, individual clients, it is enormously interesting. It's very, very overwhelmingly interesting to ask them to define the value at its most constructive state. There's usually some chuckling and some giggling because they really in that moment become aware of, oh, that is actually not something that I do with that word all the time. I am also, because once I define the positive state of that value, it's quite easy to identify the destructive and go, I see why that didn't work out, or yeah, I get that one. So it's fun to always have a little, if we can't laugh at ourselves, heck, I don't even know where we are, what we're doing. So defining the word is one thing. Use a thesaurus, dive into it to get your top 4 or 5. Then you need to actually define each with a one, I say a very brief, please don't give me paragraphs again, a very brief sentence. It can feel like bullet form. It doesn't need to be a correct grammatical sentence. What does that value mean? So I can be a real stickler for detail in some areas of my life, and in other areas, I really don't care. So some people who have experienced me in one of the, would say, well, you're a little bit of a perfectionist, Ali, and I'd say, actually, it's excellence that I love. And yet excellence is not one of my top values. If I was to gave you a list of, say, 10, yeah, I would probably show up there, but it's not on my core list. Excellence is part of my definition of one of my top values, which is ambition. For my entire life, I can look back and there's nothing that I do halfway. I just don't. And I'm telling you, if I do it halfway, it doesn't work. I either love something, like obsessed with it, or I'm not interested. I ambitiously do everything that I do. And I love that. And I don't tend to work well with people or have great relationships with people who don't have that same sense of ambition, not perfection. So when I define ambition, for me, it is about passionately pursuing a goal or outcome or dream with excellence. So there's passion in there. So someone could say, well, you're kind of over the top passionate, Ali. Well, actually, passion isn't one of my top values. Again, it's in my definer of ambition. And this is where, as I've mentioned, it's important to unravel that ball of yarn to get to and consistently ask yourself, is this an outcome, a byproduct of when I live a value, or is this actually the value itself? And just mull that over a little bit. Give yourself time to do this, by the way. Unless you're doing this with a professional coach like myself, this could take you a while. It's okay. Just one bite at a time. Work it down over time. You're better to spend the time on this and get clear on it than attempt to rush through it and end up with some enlightened wish list, which is not you anyway. Once you have that definer of what that value looks like constructively, oh my goodness, particularly as a business person, it becomes enormously powerful. Now, as a business coach, I actually challenge my clients to not only use their purpose, life purpose or business purpose statement that we talked about in the last blab on their business card or on their voicemail, and it had better show up in 90% of the marketing languaging that you are using, whether it's on your website, on a trifold flyer, I don't care. Don't let anybody do marketing work with you. Don't pay a penny for any marketing work unless they are willing to help you get clear on a purpose vision, and value statement, because that's the number one language that everything else about that content should be built around. So when you have values as a business person, I simply say, and it actually says in various forms on my website, my ideal client, because I know if you're not ambitious, I don't want to work with you. If you don't really want to go after something that you're passionate about, that is meaningful to you, I'm probably not the best coach for you. And that is so powerful to say. And again, it doesn't make the people who don't want to work with me wrong. Not at all. I'm not the perfect coach for every person in the world. Oh my goodness, no. But I can tell you with quite a high level of certainty who I am the best coach for. And those people will align with at least 3 to 4 of my core values. Now, even though you've defined your value, when I go back to loyalty, loyalty might mean one thing for you. It might mean something quite different for another person. So this is important to understand, that you may share the same word, but without a one-sentence definer to clearly understand what does that value mean to you at its most constructive form, when it's happening in its highest level, what does it mean? That's when you know if you're aligned with someone or not. So just knowing your 4 or 5 words is actually about 50% of the work. That's what you've done. Now you need to go and define them, so that when I'm looking for clients, when I'm going to work with a business, when I'm even going and being hired by someone to do a speaking engagement, if that organizing committee, if that professional association, if the group doesn't align with my values, it's not going to go well. I can tell you, there are people that I have worked with over the years who were not a values match for me. And I would be lying to tell you that I knew they weren't from the beginning. I was operating in a space of scarcity. I was trying to get in maybe my hours for certification, or I don't know, whatever. And they were not a values match for me. And it was difficult to have the meaningful conversations at the depth that needed to happen to actually have the transformation through coaching to get the results this client was looking for, because we fundamentally believe different things. And we didn't get each other. So the conversations took longer to have, to create the understanding, to get the results that the client wanted. And it doesn't serve. It just doesn't serve anyone. In all of my career, being self-employed and running all my own, accounts payable and all my own invoicing, anything, the 2 times that I've had difficulty getting paid, twice, in over a decade, twice, were clients I were not aligned with in values. So, it's really easy in this case to say, oh, well, you're this kind of person, but you know what? Get over yourself. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's right. It's not wrong. It's that we are all having a different set of values. And we, in every moment, have the choice to live those values constructively or destructively, because the value itself is inherently neutral. So this is where really conscious living comes, to literally wake up every day and say, how am I going to constructively live my values today? And as I pointed out in the workshops and retreats that I do, it can be a simple exercise. I can give someone an exercise, go for a walk. So let's use ambition. One of my top values, ambition. Well, how would I ambitiously go for a walk? Well, I would passionately walk, enthusiastically, and with excellence. So I'd probably want to follow a path given, or find a map first, or, something like that. And I can easily express the simplest, what feels like, oh, it's just a value, it's just a walk. Actually, no. The experience, the felt experience of doing the simplest exercise while constructively living a value often has people that wonder why they didn't do this before. Because it actually brings meaning. It can bring meaning to the most mundane task, really. So let me go back to sort of the negative, the form of values is when I'm working with clients and they call me, and I say, what would you like to work on today? And I'm so upset about so-and-so, and this is what happened. And I know right then and there is a value that feels as though for them it's being stepped on or compromised in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't get pissed off. At a fundamental level, we don't get pissed off. We don't get angry with people unless there is a value that is someone's kind of crashing on our values fence. And so that's another reason why it's so important to be clear about this, because, let's face it, when we're in a conflict with anybody, what's the first thing we want to do? You are such a you. Yeah, well, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't serve. And it actually is not the truth. The truth is, I think I have a value that's feeling compromised here. I'd like a minute to explore that, or I just need a minute to think about that. And they might have a value that perhaps is just simply not aligned with you. Maybe they're playing a value it's coming out destructively. Not that I recommend you pointing that out to them. But it really depersonalizes conflict. So instead of wanting to go you, I say, well, wait a minute. Why am I so enormously frustrated by this? And wow, this is so true for me. Actually, just a couple days ago, I was laid awake, just so worked up, and talking myself through. Okay, you have a value that's feeling stepped on. It's okay, Allie. Deep breathe. You have a value that's feeling compromised. That person's not right. You're not right. Nobody's wrong. You have a value. Okay. So knowing that I have a value that's feeling compromised, now what? Well, now I'm not so frustrated with that person. I'm not making it or projecting my feelings, my anger, my frustration on them. Now I can say, okay, I understand it's a value. I'm still really frustrated and worked up, but my communication with them is entirely different now. Because now I can say, look, I see that what's happening here is actually, this is about my value of respect or fairness or something, and I'm feeling like it's compromised. And I'm so riled up. So here's what this value would feel like to me if it was playing constructively right now, or something like that. So I hope you understand that it depersonalizes conflict, because once I understand the values and what they feel like for me, I also know what it's like when they're feeling compromised. I can take ownership of that and simply start to form a new communication about asking for what I need. That person may not be willing to participate, but at least now I understand how to get more of what it is that I want. Now, values is the reason I use the metaphor of the values fence and the gate, if you need 5, is that a fence is quite a natural boundary. So in all of our lives where we are so poorly taught how to set effective boundaries and hold them and mean it, a values fence is a boundary. It's saying if these kinds of fundamental behaviors beliefs are not present, I'm not willing to play that game, and you are not coming in my corral, my values corral, because it won't go well. And that's not honoring and respectful to me. It's not honoring and respectful to you. So knowing your values and the definers of them to set up the values corral is one of the best, simplest tools that you can use to set yourself on a really positive path to having boundaries. Having boundaries in your life and understanding why you have them, what it feels like when they're not there, and how amazing it feels when you do hold them when they are there. When values are, so let me take this to a business perspective again for a minute, and then I'm going to turn it on a personal perspective. In business, never fails, business owners, business leaders. We'll get through some basic work, and now we'll start to talk about their team. how to work with their team so that their team is more aligned, more effective, communicates better, and happier, and therefore profits follow. There is always one employee, always one, sometimes two, depending on the size of, the size of the organization. And they say, well, I have these couple employees. I mean, it's just constant. They don't do this and they don't do this and blah, 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 blah. Or every time I go to do this, they always say this. So here's what I say. Okay, let's write down the core values that we've done the work to determine. Write them down, 4 or 5 of them. Now, on a scale of 1 to 5, I want you to rate that employee A on how you feel they are with each of those values. So let's say loyalty is 1, ambition's 1, freedom's 1. So we'll take that employee and have a think for a second. Okay, how do I perceive that employee is relative to loyalty? You know, between 1 and 5. How do I feel that employee is relative to freedom? Between 1 and 5. How do I feel that employee behaves relative to ambition? 1 to 5. Never fails. Never fails. That employee only aligns with generally 2, sometimes 3 out of 5 of those values. And if we were asked them to define them, their definers of that word is quite different. So the employee is not bad. Please let it go. They are not, it will become toxic. If people are in a values mismatch in an organization for too long, they'll start to actually unconsciously sabotage because their own values are feeling suppressed. And it's a psychological unraveling that starts to happen. It's not positive for anyone, not for the business, not for the person. So what I say to them is, you know what, let them go to some place where they are aligned, but do not make this their fault. Who hired that person? You did. Who had them through an interview and made it okay to hire someone who was a mismatch in values to the organization? You did. So you need to take ownership and have the situation handled in an appropriate and accountable way such that they are set free to go and find some place that they are aligned with. Situations that have already gone too far down the line and are now sometimes in legal precedents and everything else, it's also generally a values mismatch. And it's terrible to see what happens in the professional world and the extents that people go to feel right and make people wrong when really we're not aligned on values. Let's let it go. Shake hands, move on. Values, core values must, absolutely must be clarified and used in every interview process. Now, I don't mean going in and saying to the, my prospective employee, so are you ambitious? Well, that's setting them up. Are they going to say yes? Are they going to say no? It's, But there's ways to structure the interview that the questions, or perhaps multiple choice, if you do an online assessment or something prior to them actually coming in for a live interview, there are ways to integrate values questions in a way that actually reveals whether they're aligned with your organization right from the get-go, and can avoid a whole ton of this mess if businesses just did this right up front. Now, the other part I want to bring out about business and values alignment is is Marshall Goldsmith. He's a renowned coach, best-selling author multiple times over, incredible man. He has done studies with his daughter, actually, who works at the Kellogg Institute, around engagement. Now, engagement's like the key. It's a sexy word in business. And because, when profits in the economy are down, it's all about engagement. How do we engage our employees? Blah, 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 blah. He actually studied that one of the best ways to keep employees engaged is to help them to understand their core values, their personal core values, and the organization's core values, so that they feel invited every single day to come to work and constructively express their own values within the values corral of the business and know the impact that that's going to bring. Did you get that? The number one way to determine and increase an employee's engagement in a company is to support them to find their own values, and if they are a match for the organization, how they can bring their values to their own workplace every single day and live them constructively such that it feeds the corporate values and creates impact. Take that one to your boss, please. So values are a fantastic way of determining whether or not an employee is a fit or not. And again, it's not right or wrong. And they're one of the best ways to improve engagement. Now let's talk about this actually, before I finish the business, one, values are determined within the organization, within any business. I don't care if you have 5 employees, I don't care if you have 5,000 employees. They constantly need to be reiterated over and over and over. This is the core values of this corporation, and this is what they look like at a positive and constructive place. Here's why. It's empowering. Because at every level in an organization, at some point, an employee is going to be asked to make a decision, perform a behavior, something, and there will not be a CEO or HR professional standing right beside them to make that decision. How do they make that decision? Values. They get to ask themselves in that moment, is this a way where I can further express the values of this organization at a constructive level? If it is, yes, I think that that is a great choice. I'm going to go and do that. Is this a way that, or is this a way that doesn't feel like this is aligned with the values of the organization as we define them? And if I go and carry this out or make this choice, it doesn't feel like I'm forwarding those values? No, I am not going to do that. Simple, 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 simple. And yet the number one way to empower your employees, get them to understand the core values of the business, reiterate them and their definers, the one sentence definer, over and over and over in every form of writing, in every corporate meeting, in every, have people actually then have employees come to meetings and say, I do this in the workshops that I do with businesses once we've carried them out for 6 months or so, or 3 months. Say to them, so Joe, tell me, how did you constructively carry out ambition in the last month? Tell me an example. Get them to start rounding out this value word and what it looks like for them personally within the organization, how they lived it out. Oh my gosh, you're talking now exponential results. Exponential, off the charts, what is possible when you do that in a company. It's incredible. So thank you for that little bit. Let me go back to personal for a minute and then we're going to wrap up. Personal values, when they are misaligned, and this does happen, and it is challenging when children are born into this world and they have a different set of values than the family they were born into. This is really challenging, and because we don't go firing and rehiring family members. And I don't encourage selling them or giving them away either, all joking aside. There are reasons that families can have enormously toxic parts to them. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but values is a simple way that we can stop pointing the finger and get out of some perpetual, really negative habits with some of our family members. If we understand that just because I was born into a family doesn't mean I have the same values. I may not actually be aligned in the values. Or maybe I'm aligned in the values, but my definers of those, the way I choose to live them at their fullest level so that I experience more joy and fulfillment, and which, by the way, are all byproducts. Joy is generally not a value. Fulfillment, never. Scratch it from your list. I won't let you. Fulfillment is the outcome of when you live your values constructively and your purpose. Families tend to have the greatest level of conflict when there is a member, a core member, a key member of a family that is not aligned with the values. I'm not going to get into, that's a whole other family coaching thing that takes a lot of negotiating and a lot of awareness to work around so they can navigate a lifetime of a relationship just being in a family. But it also, I think, is where a great deal of the term is sort of the black sheep of the family. The black sheep of the family isn't necessarily that, you know, you flushed your mother's iPhone down the toilet, or you had way too much to drink at the family reunion, became the laughing stock, and nobody wants to talk to you now. Yeah, well, you might have done something really stupid, okay? I can't help you with that. I'm sorry about it. It's in the past. I hope that they can work through that. But on an ongoing, perpetual level, when family just doesn't seem to align, there is a lack of awareness around values. Personality style is another one, and they're just not the same. And it can be really painful, very, very painful. And I really encourage you to seek a coach, get a coach to get help to increase, some of the awareness so that you can help to put some language around this, remove the I'm better, you're worse, I'm right, you're wrong, my way is the way, yours obviously is not thing. Because over the long term and very quickly, it becomes shaming. And if you're familiar at all with any of the work of Dr. Brené Brown, I strongly recommend you get familiar with it if you're not. Shame, long term, can have enormously negative consequences on someone's psyche. So that's unfortunate. Again, there is ways around it. There's works around it. It takes work. It takes commitment. It takes work. There's ways around it. And that's what happens when values are misaligned within a family. I think we just assume that, particularly in our immediate family, mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, that we are aligned. Of course, we're going to be aligned, at least enough that we can have a constructive relationship. And actually, it's not true. It doesn't always happen that way. So if that sounds like you and that sounds like your family, I just encourage you to take a step back and have a look at, is this a values issue? Is this a mismatched values issue? Maybe the way they're carrying out their values has me feel like one of mine is being stepped on. Take ownership of that and maybe start the conversation from there. Okay, so just to summarize, values are not inherently positive or negative. It's how you live them out. There's a light side and a dark side to everything. Values are your compass for your daily behavior. I hope every one of you find your core values and then wake up every day and say, how am I going to constructively live my values today? And then your list of 4, maybe 5. Because you will naturally feel more fulfilled, more joy when you are living your values constructively. When you know what they look like on the dark side, it's also very helpful because you can you have greater awareness to reel yourself in, to turn yourself around and get back onto the constructive side where you're creating more impact, positive impact for yourself and for others when you understand what that looks like. When you are having a great deal of challenge in any relationship, it is likely a values mismatch. And taking ownership and having awareness of that is the first step to making the best of any situation. Values are not right and values are not wrong. So when you don't align with someone, being on the side of righteous judgment because you don't like their values or the way they're living them, you know what? You don't always live yours perfectly either. I certainly don't. So let's take ownership over our own and go from there. So using the past blab talk that I did about life purpose, when we understand our life purpose and we go out into the world wanting to do even more of that in the way that is unique to me, which is my values equation, it's sort of like everybody has a recipe for stew. We're all going to end up with stew at the end of it. You know, we're a chili cook-off. Everyone's going to eat chili. It's all called chili. But my recipe is inherently unique to me and yours is unique to you. That's because I have a different values that I put in my that mixes it up and makes it look good, you know? So know your values. Know your values so that you understand who you are going to have the most constructive, amazing relationships with, whether it's friendship, whether it's intimate relationship, and particularly if it's business relationship. Know your values. Be willing to communicate them on a regular basis with everyone around you. Put them in all of your marketing material. If you're doing this for business, your values should be right smack up front on your website. So people know, no, this person isn't a match for me. Or yeah, this person would be a match for me. I don't care what you do. It's the values that you hold behind it that are going to make the work with the other person enjoyable and rich or not. So they are a daily compass. Getting up every day. How am I going to constructively live my values today? And knowing that, give yourself some grace. Have some compassion, because we don't always do them well. We don't always do them on the light side. That is so, so, so powerful. If you are going to look for a job, if you're going to seek employment, ask a lot of questions about what you feel that company's values are, or if they haven't, because you would not believe the numbers of companies that have not done this, or at least not done it effectively. Ask a lot of questions and be willing to share your values with them, because it will come apparent very quickly, hopefully right in the interview stage, whether or not this is an aligned company for you, and what that's going to look like. Get up every day and set in your calendar ways that you are going to construct your values, and chase after, you know, the actual form, like the actual what you're going to do, that are ways that you can obviously and more constructively live out your values. You're going to bring so much more to this world, which is why we're here, to create that impact. And you're going to have so much a richer experience doing it, you won't even believe it. That is values. That's my snippet on values. It's called the values equation, because often they don't add up. And when they do, it's exponential, exponentially you. And in business, you know, again, it's not your employee. They're probably a values mismatch. Do the right thing. And be prepared to include values in all of your hiring statements. Put it in all of your marketing. Let people know. Values are one of the best branding exercises that you can do. Lets people know who you really are and who your company is as well. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on Exponentially You, living passionately on purpose, and this discussion on values. I will be continuing my blab talks. I will be posting the link for you if you've missed this. I'll be posting it on my Facebook page, Twitter, at Allie Payne, so that you can listen to it later. I'll also be posting this to YouTube. So if you follow my YouTube channel, Allison Payne, ALYSONPAIN, me in the lovely pink dress, you will find it there. Thank you again, and I look forward to talking to you next week. We are going to be talking about personality styles, decoding the interspecies personality barrier, and talking about how that affects all of our communication and relationships as we continue to layer this sort of the purpose and the values and the rest to have a greater awareness of who we are and how we are in this world, so we can all get the most of it. Thank you again so much. Have a fabulous day. Bye.